Blessings of the Triple Gem. Welcome to our Dhamma session on developing an unblemished mind. And this is based on Venerable Sāriputta and Venerable MahāMoggallāna teaching in this Anaṅgaṇa Sutta. We can begin by paying homage to the Triple Gem. We can bow our heads in Anjali. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dhamma, and homage to the Noble Sangha. In today's session, we'll begin with an overview of this Anaṅgaṇa Sutta. It's Majjhima Nikaya Discourse number 5. It's quite a comprehensive teaching by Venerable Sāriputta in particular, as well as assistance or contribution from Venerable MahāMoggallāna. And it's really about developing this unblemished mind. So we'll briefly examine the architecture of the sutta, why this teaching is beneficial as a way to encourage ourselves. Then we'll deep dive into the sutta, beginning with Venerable Sāriputta's instructions on the 4 kinds of persons, and those to be called inferior and superior, and his use of the simile of a bronze dish, which helps us to understand the distinction. Then we'll look at Venerable MahāMoggallāna's question on what is a blemish, and examine Venerable Sāriputta's instruction and the numerous cases he's given to the bhikkhus, but we'll look at it from the point of view of reframing it, how to contemplate it as lay people. Then we'll do a short meditation to contemplate that Dhamma using our own examples. And then we'll continue with the sutta to link this to the 4 nutriment table. And we'll go through Venerable Sāriputta's additional simile, this time of a covered dish. Then we'll also look at Venerable MahāMoggallāna's instructions, which completes the teaching. And following that, if there's any questions or comments, we can discuss, and we'll close with the sharing of merit and blessings. So before we launch in, a few tips and reminders to help those who might be new, those who are new maybe even to Buddha's teachings, and also to those who want to look at this from a different approach. It serves as a way to prepare the mind, all of us, in terms of hearing the Buddha's words, being able to lean into them. So the first one is keeping an open mind. We often come with different preconceptions or very strong opinions about Buddha Dhamma. So the first is about giving ourselves the opportunity to hear the Buddha's words fresh. We come, be open to listening to it from a different perspective, not coming with a fault-finding mind, and be open to areas where we can develop and grow in our spiritual practice. The second is be okay with not understanding everything. So as we know at school, our conditioning is very strong to understand everything right off the bat. In Dhamma, it's different. So sometimes it takes a while for things to simmer. There might be new words that we need to connect with and a different way of looking at things, particularly similes. Sometimes it takes a while for it to unlock. And just remember that Buddha says it's a gradual training, a gradual practice, and we make gradual progress. So be okay with whatever resonates. If it's one moment, one thing, one word, one sutta, even one insight. And then remember that we're all learners. We come together as brothers and sisters and friends in Dhamma, and we're leaning on each other during this session to learn, to make effort, and to penetrate the Buddha's teachings. So it's really wonderful to lean on each other's goodness and everyone's noble aspiration. So we're in this together, and there's joy in encouraging one another. And during the meditation, make sure to apply yourself to the Buddha's words. That we'll do a short meditation in the middle of our session on Venerable Sāriputta's teaching. And that will help us to clean the mind, uplift it, and also calm it. And throughout this session, I'll be reminding to use your own examples because it's our way of directly connecting with the Dhamma. So it becomes living Dhamma for us. And I'll provide different examples during the session, but in the meditation, there might be particular examples that are more resonant with you, that are your own examples. And so in this way, we see the Dhamma, and by seeing the Dhamma, we see the Buddha, and therefore by seeing the Buddha, we see the Dhamma, and same goes. And then lastly, let's have good wishes for everyone joining today, and all the people who have helped us on this long journey. Anyone who's encouraged us and continues to do so, let's think of them now. Okay, let's begin by looking at the architecture. But first, let me just say that Anangana Sutta is in the Middle Length Discourses, so we call this Majjhima Nikaya, and it's in the chapter which is the chapter on the root of all things. So it's the fifth discourse entitled Anangana, and that means unblemished. So Angana, the word translates as blemish or stained or defiled, and Anangana means the opposite, so unblemished, unstained, undefiled. So already from the title of this, and if you've been attending other sessions, you'll know that this is a very complementary sutta to the Vatupama Sutta, to the Anumana Sutta, and more recently to the Sacitta Sutta. And it's part of this collection of teachings on contemplating the mind and knowing the mind as it really is. So part of Chittanupassana. So it helps us to develop the mind. So from a bhavata chitta perspective, what we do is we really, through right view, establish right thought or intention. So samma sankappa. And we do this through abandoning or washing away the wrong thoughts or intentions. Through this, that's how we reach right concentration, samma samadhi. So as we highlighted in the session on Sacitta Sutta, what we do is we're abandoning the path of greed, hatred, and delusion. What we said was the wrong Eightfold Path. And we do that in order to develop the path of non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. So the Noble Eightfold Path. And so as we know, or for those who are new to Buddha's teachings, it's the path that leads us to complete liberation, the cessation of suffering. So again, these are supramundane teachings that if we practice and develop correctly, they can lead to noble attainment, so the development of wholesome qualities, and ultimately to nibbana. So with that in mind, the architecture of the sutta, the first part of the sutta is where Venerable Sāriputta instructs the bhikkhus on four kinds of persons found in the world. And he terms some of them inferior and some of them superior. And then Venerable MahāMoggallāna asks Venerable Sāriputta, what is the cause and reason for why they're called inferior or superior? And then Venerable Sāriputta explains using the simile of a dirty and stained bronze dish. So that's the first part. And then part two is where Venerable MahāMoggallāna then asks for an explanation of the term blemish. And that's the Pali word Anangana. And Venerable Sāriputta explained it as a term for the sphere of these evil, unwholesome wishes. And then he gave anger and bitterness as two blemishes and provided 19 cases to demonstrate. So with Venerable MahāMoggallāna's follow-up question, we start to go deeper into the explanation of a blemish. We need to know that in order to develop an unblemished mind. So these cases, which we'll go through one by one, really help us to understand exactly what a blemish is and how unwholesome wishes contribute to a blemish arising. Then part three, Venerable Sāriputta then explained using a simile of a covered bronze dish, so slightly different from the first one, how our companions in the spiritual life would not honor and respect us if we haven't abandoned these blemishes. But if we have abandoned these blemishes, then our companions in the spiritual life would honor and respect us. So there's very powerful Dhamma in this part of the sutta that we're going to explore, particularly around good friendship and also how it relates to having a good practice or not so good practice, and how it also links with whether we develop or whether we actually decline in our overall practice. And then part four is Venerable MahāMoggallāna rejoicing Venerable Sāriputta's teaching with his own simile. And in support, then he gives a very comprehensive list of blemishes with reference to false recluses or renunciants and their wholesome counterparts with reference to true renunciants. And he ends by further praising Venerable Sāriputta using a simile of a garland. So as you can see, there's a lot of similes in this sutta, but overall very uplifting words that we'll go through in this part four. And also this teaching is not a short teaching, not like Sacitta Sutta in the sense of there's quite a lot to read out. So just bear this in mind as we go through. So why is this teaching beneficial? So I put on this slide just some of them that we'll look at. And really this becomes our motivation for looking at this sutta. The first one is emphasizes the importance of knowing if we have blemishes and if we don't have them. and how this makes us a superior person. So self-examination and therefore self-knowledge is one of the key parts of Venerable Sāriputta's teaching in this Anaṅgaṇa Sutta. We know that self-examination has been something that comes up time and time again when we look at suttas like Vatopama or Saichitta or Anumana or even Karaniya Metta Sutta. And in this, Venerable Sāriputta makes it quite explicit why someone would be called inferior or superior as part of how they practice. The second benefit is it helps us to develop qualities that make us easy to instruct. So easy to instruct, if you remember from Karaniya Metta Sutta and Anumana Sutta, is suvacho. And the opposite of being difficult to instruct is duvacho. So that's a key step of, say, Karaniya Metta Sutta, step number 3. Now, Anumana Sutta is one of the suttas we develop in order to become easy to instruct. So when we understand blemishes, which is the topic of this sutta, more specifically the sphere of unwholesome wishes, which is what we're seeing is this is where the Anaṅgaṇa Sutta and the Anumana Sutta connect. So this particular sutta helps us to remove qualities that make us difficult to instruct and therefore develop qualities that make us easy to instruct. And so when we're easy to instruct, it's easier for us to understand the Dhamma, is what the Buddha would say, also to maintain good friendship and therefore make progress in our practice. And then the third benefit is Venerable Sāriputta gives us this masterclass on evil, unwholesome wishes that result in anger and bitterness. So that's the focus of his masterclass in this sutta today. And this helps us to contemplate and connect with this Dhamma. So we're going to go through Venerable Sāriputta's teaching in quite a lot of detail. And of course, these many cases, as well as his quite a few similes as well. So all of these are very helpful in developing a superior practice. And then the fourth is it highlights how a blemished mind makes us err in material things, while an unblemished mind makes us an heir in the Dhamma. So there's a strong connection with this teaching to the Buddha's encouragement to become an heir in Dhamma and not an heir in material things. So we're going to make some connection between Venerable Sāriputta's teaching in Dhammadayada Sutta, and we'll go through this a little bit later in the session, and it can be very helpful. And then the last benefit is we get this rare teaching from Venerable Sāriputta and Venerable MahāMoggallāna. And of course, we do come across Venerable Sāriputta and Venerable MahāMoggallāna in discourses throughout the Sutta Pitaka, but this is quite a rare one. Now, as most of you will know, Venerable Sāriputta and Venerable MahāMoggallāna, they shared a profound and enduring spiritual friendship. It began in childhood and it lasted throughout their lives as the two chief disciples of the Buddha. Venerable Sāriputta, he was the first one to encounter the Buddha's teachings when he met Venerable Assaji. And when he heard the verse, all things arise from causes, that's when he entered the stream. So he went looking for his friend, who was not yet called Venerable MahāMoggallāna, but he went to find him and he shared the exact same verse, and that led to Venerable MahāMoggallāna also attaining stream entry. And then after ordaining under the Buddha, the two became the Buddha's two chief disciples. Venerable Sāriputta was declared by the Buddha as the foremost amongst those with great wisdom, so Mahapanya, and Venerable MahāMoggallāna as foremost amongst those with psychic potency, so Idimantana. So in their complementary roles within the Sangha, we know that Venerable Sāriputta was likened to a mother who brings forth the spiritual life, while Venerable MahāMoggallāna was likened to a nurse who nurtures the newly ordained monks to full enlightenment. And their friendship was marked by mutual respect, deep affection, and constant support. When one was ill, the other would go to great lengths to obtain medicine and care. And they frequently discussed Dhamma. And of course, their conversations will often refer back to the Buddha for confirmation. So they're very good role models for us in terms of spiritual friendship. Now, in this Anaṅgaṇa Sutta, why we say it's quite rare is because these two great elders, they're in dialogue using a style of teaching that is by question and answer to instruct the bhikkhus. So it's not that when questions are asked by Venerable MahāMoggallāna that he doesn't know the answer. He does know the answer, but they're using it as a method to teach the monks. So in the Sutta Pitaka, we find a number of instances where there are others who are doing this kind of instruction. So Venerable Sāriputta and Venerable MahāMoggallāna also use this kind of technique a number of times when instructing the monks. Now, apparently, this is the first time that we find Venerable Sāriputta, or maybe actually the only instance where we find Venerable Sāriputta and Venerable MahāMoggallāna instructing in this way. So Venerable MahāMoggallāna in this is the questioner, so in Pali that's Puchaka, and Venerable Sāriputta is the clarifier, the Visajjaka. Okay, let's now deep dive into the sutta. So it begins. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi, in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. There the Venerable Sāriputta addressed the bhikkhus thus. Friends, bhikkhus. Friend, they replied. The Venerable Sāriputta said this. Friends, there are 4 kinds of persons found existing in the world. What 4? Here, some person with a blemish does not understand it as it actually is, thus, I have a blemish in myself. Here, some person with a blemish understands as it actually is, thus, I have a blemish in myself. Here, some person with no blemish does not understand it as it actually is, thus, I have no blemish in myself. And then lastly, here, some person with no blemish understands it as it actually is, thus, I have no blemish in myself. So the key Pali words here are sanganova, so that means with a blemish or with a defilement or impurity. Anganova, without a blemish or with without a defilement or impurity. And then yata bhuta na pajanati. So that person doesn't understand it as it actually is, or they don't know it clearly. And the opposite is yata bhutang pajanati. So they do understand it as it actually is, or they know it clearly, whether they have blemishes or not. So of the 4 people, there are 2 with blemishes and there are 2 with no blemishes. And in each case, one knows that they have it or don't have it. And in the other case, they know or they don't know that they have or they don't have it. Okay. So then Venerable Sāriputta went on to state, herein the person with a blemish who does not understand it as it actually is thus, I have a blemish in myself, is called the inferior of these 2 persons with a blemish. Herein the person with a blemish who understands it as it actually is thus, I have a blemish in myself, is called the superior of these 2 persons with a blemish. Herein, person with no blemish, who does not understand it as it actually is thus, I have no blemish, is called the inferior of these 2 persons with no blemish. And then the last one, herein the person with no blemish who understands it as it actually is, thus I have no blemish, is called the superior of these 2 persons with no blemish. So a person is called inferior if they do not know whether they have or haven't got a blemish, or the alternative is they're called superior if they know whether they have or haven't got blemishes. So then Venerable MahāMoggallāna says this, when this was said, the Venerable MahāMoggallāna asked Venerable Sāriputta, friend Sāriputta, what is the cause and reason why of these 2 persons with a blemish, one is called the inferior man and one is called the superior man? What is the cause and reason why of these 2 persons with no blemish, one is called the inferior man and one is called the superior man? So here we have the first question asked by Venerable MahāMoggallāna. He's asking the question not because he doesn't know, so just a reminder, but as a means for instructing the bhikkhus. To answer Venerable MahāMoggallāna, Venerable Sāriputta gives this simile of a dirty stained bronze dish to explain the cause and reason why one is called inferior and the other superior between the 2 people with blemishes. So let's see. Herein, friend, when a person with a blemish does not understand it as it actually is, thus, I have a blemish in myself, it can be expected that he will not arouse zeal, make effort, or instigate energy to abandon that blemish, and that he will die with lust, hate, and delusion, with a blemish, with mind defiled. Suppose a bronze dish were brought from a shop or a smithy, covered with dirt and stains, and the owners neither used it nor had it cleaned, but put it away in a dusty corner. Would the bronze dish thus would the bronze dish thus get more defiled and stained later on? Yes, friend. So too, friend, when a person with a blemish does not understand it as it actually is, thus, I have a blemish in myself, it can be expected that he will die with a mind defiled. So we'll just stop there. With this particular simile of the dirty stained bronze dish, and the owners haven't used it or cleaned it, and they've just left it in a dusty corner to collect dust, Venerable Sariputta has shown that it's like this person's mind, that they're called inferior because they don't have any compulsion to remove blemishes to clean their mind. They don't know it. And so over time, because they haven't generated any desire or effort to abandon the blemishes, their mind would continue to gather more blemishes and remain defiled. So most of the people in the world who live with the wrong view, who lack virtue, fall into this category. So for example, a hunter who loves to hunt animals in the wild and post pictures of their kills to the internet doesn't understand that death is suffering. They think that death is pleasurable. So they wouldn't abandon the hunting, and they certainly wouldn't remove the evil desire or the blemish in their mind to kill. And then others who have wrong views, such as believing, oh, tit for tat. If you harm me with your words, then I can harm you with mine. It's fair game, for example. So in that case, such persons don't think that there's anything wrong with harmful speech or ill will thoughts. And that's why they're also called inferior. So the result for such a person would be quite dire because they continue to develop the wrong path and they die with lust, hatred, and delusion, with that defiled mind. And so a bad destination can be expected. So this is what Venerable Sariputta is calling inferior of the two people with blemishes. Then he said, herein, when a person with a blemish understands it as it actually is, thus, I have a blemish in myself, it can be expected that he will arouse zeal, make effort, and instigate energy to abandon that blemish, and that he will die without lust, hate, and delusion, without blemish, with mind undefiled. Suppose a bronze dish were brought from a shop or a smithy covered with dirt and stains, and the owners used it and had it cleaned and did not put it in a dusty corner. Would the bronze dish thus get cleaner and brighter later on? Yes, friend. So too, friend, when a person with a blemish understands it as it actually is, thus, I have a blemish in myself, it can be expected that he will die with mind undefiled. So in this case, the owners of that dirty, stained bronze dish, they actually use it and they clean it and they don't let it sit in a dusty corner. So similarly, this person is superior because they actually generate desire, effort to abandon the blemishes and to clean their mind. They don't allow the mind to collect any of those blemishes or defilements. So we as trainees or sekas in Pali, we fall into this category because we've heard the Buddha's teachings, we've learned teachings like this one, the Vatupama Sutta, Sacitta Sutta, and numerous other ones, and we know how to self-examine. We know that we have blemishes, and so we remove them in our meditation. And as a result, our predicament as trainees isn't as dire because we actively do the noble washing, the Arya Dovana in Pali. And this changes the course to develop the noble path. And so in this case, we're not expected to die with lust, hatred, and delusion. It's the opposite. We would have an undefiled mind, and a good destination could be expected unless we attain Nibbana. So you can see this rings true with the same sort of teachings in Vatupama Sacitta Sutta. We know that the Buddha does not tolerate blemishes or defilements, but encourages to actively remove them. And if you remember the simile from last week, it was to remove them as if our head or clothes were on fire. So we wouldn't just sit back and tolerate or observe them, we would jump to it. And so that's what Venerable Sāriputta is calling superior of the two people with blemishes. Okay, so we now come to the next part. And in this case, we have this simile of a clean, bright bronze dish. And he gives this particular simile to explain the cause and reason for those persons that are called inferior and superior who don't have any blemishes. So Herein, when a person with no blemish does not understand it as it actually is, thus, I have no blemish in myself, it can be expected that he will give attention to the sign of the beautiful, that by his doing so lust will infect his mind, and that he will die with lust, hate, and delusion, with a blemish, with mind defiled. Suppose a bronze dish was brought from a shop or smithy, clean and bright, and the owners neither used it nor had it cleaned, but put it in a dusty corner. Would the bronze dish thus get more defiled and more stained later on? Yes, friend. So too, friend, when a person with no blemish does not understand it as it actually is, thus, I have no blemish in myself, it can be expected that he will die with mind defiled. So in this case, we have a clean, bright bronze dish. The owners, they don't use it, they don't clean it, and they do leave it in that dusty corner to gather dust. And eventually it becomes more dirty and stained over time. So this is similar to the person who has no blemishes. Their mind is clean. But because they don't know, they allow their senses to roam freely. And when they contact an agreeable object through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, they unwisely attend to the sign of the beautiful. So that's subha nimitta in Pali. So we know from the Ahara Sutta, which is in Samyutta Nikaya, that when we unwisely attend or contemplate to the sign of the beautiful, it's the nutriment for the arising of unarisen sensual desire and for the increase and expansion of arisen sensual desire. So we know that's a hindrance for us. Now, according to the first profitable or unprofitable direction, so we know this as kablinkara hara. So we take the physical nutriment as beautiful or pleasing, and sensual desire increases and escalates. And so we have this post-perception of pleasure, and we end up going the wrong way with desire. So an example of what Venerable Sāriputta means like about this kind of person is, imagine we have a good meditation and we've cleaned the mind. So we're free of blemishes. And the minute we come out of our meditation, we go and sit in front of the TV and we see an advertisement, or we look on social media and a friend is traveling in an exotic destination. And if we take in what we see, whether it's food, whether it's a person or some other thing, and we take it as beautiful or pleasing, then what happens? Sensual desire or covetousness comes to arise. And then it escalates and we go the wrong way with desire. So there's danger is what Venerable Sāriputta is saying here. So despite having a clean mind, having cleaned it, we immediately go into the danger zone. And so these blemishes or mental stains, defilements can arise and multiply. And so in this way, we become an inferior person. And as he says, what can be expected at the point of death? If we die with lust, hatred, and delusion, with this defiled mind, then a bad destination can be expected. So this is the first of the two people without blemishes, and this is the inferior practice. And then Venerable Sāriputta said, herein, when a person with no blemish understands it as it actually is, thus, I have no blemish in myself, it can be expected that he will not give attention to the sign of the beautiful, that by his not doing so, lust will not infect his mind, and that he will die without lust, hate, and delusion, without blemish, with mind undefiled. Suppose a bronze dish were brought from a shop or smithy, clean and bright, and the owners used it and had it cleaned and did not put it in a dusty corner. Would the bronze dish thus get cleaner and brighter later on? Yes, friend. So too, friend, when a person with no blemish understands it as it actually is, thus, I have no blemish in myself, it can be expected that he will die with a mind undefiled. So now we have this other case. So the clean, bright bronze dish, the owners use it, they clean it, and they don't leave it in a dusty corner to gather more dust. So this is similar to the person with no blemishes whose mind is clean and they know it. And unlike the inferior person, they don't allow their senses to roam freely. They practice sense restraint. They guard the senses. So they don't get caught in the agreeable objects. They don't unwisely attend to the sign of beautiful. Or when they do see an agreeable object, they would wisely attend to the sign of loathsome or foulness, so asubha nimitta, as opposed to subha nimitta, or attending to seeing the object as elements, so dhatu manasikara in Pali. But in whatever way, this person's mind remains free of blemishes, and so they're not going the wrong way with desire. So an example would be if we have a really solid Dhamma practice, but we need to go and buy something for the house, then as we go towards the store, we actively guard the senses on the way to the store. We don't take in signs and features. And then at the store, we quickly figure out what's needed without unwisely looking around, browsing, window shopping, all those other things. And so we don't get enticed by the sign of beautiful. We just simply purchase what is needed and we head home. Or if we see something, we wisely contemplate it as loathsome or unlasting or maybe unneeded, and therefore we don't see it as beautiful. And therefore, no evil wishes, no defilements arise. And in this way, we're called a superior person. Now, of course, we know this is a high practice, but it's something that distinguishes between the two inferior and superior practices. So, if this is the case, then this superior person would be expected that when they die, that it's without lust, hatred, and delusion. They'd have an undefiled mind, and so a good destination can be expected unless they attain nibbana. And so that's basically the summary of the four kinds of persons and why one is called superior or inferior of the different cases. So then he said, this is the cause and reason why of these two persons with a blemish, one is called the inferior man and one is called the superior man. This is the reason why of these two persons with no blemish, one is called the inferior man and one is called the superior man. Okay, then Venerable MahāMoggallāna asks another question. Blemish, blemish, is said, friend. What is this word blemish a term for? So he's talking about Anangana. And Venerable Sāriputta says, blemish, friend, is a term for the spheres of evil, unwholesome wishes. And in Pali, this is pāpakānaṁ, akusalānaṁ, icha vacharanam. So spheres of unwholesome wishes. So pāpaka is translated here as evil, but it can also be translated as bad, wicked, or corrupt. Sometimes people prefer the word corrupt rather than evil. In other parts of the Sutta Pitaka, the word pāpika instead of pāpaka is used, and it has the same meaning. And then akusala we know as unwholesome or unskilled. Icha is translated as wishing or wishes, also longing, desiring, or wanting. And together with avachara, this is translated as sphere or realm. So we've seen this term before, this avachara, as kama vachara, the sphere of sensuality, rupa vachara, sphere of form or materiality, arupa vachara, sphere of formless or immaterial. So here we're talking about icha. So that's why we get sphere of wishes or the realm of desires. And if you combine papaka and akusala, then you get these corrupt, evil, and unwholesome. Now, in this sutta, Venerable Sāriputta goes quite deep into evil, unwholesome wishes that relate specifically to anger and bitterness. But in other parts of the Sutta Pitaka, we find other cases or examples of corrupt wishes. So an example is Kaya Sutta, which is in chapter 10 of Anguttara Nikaya. Here the Buddha spoke about evil wishes or corrupt desires as wanting to be known as being endowed with faith or conviction when we actually don't have faith or conviction, wanting to be known as being endowed with virtue when we're not virtuous, want to be known for being learned, having heard much of the Buddha's teachings when we're of little learning or have heard little. Also wishing to be known for being secluded when we actually delight in company, and wishing to be known for being energetic when we're really lazy and slack, and then wishing to be known for being mindful, but we're really muddle-minded or unmindful, forgetful, and then wishing to be known for being wise when we're really unwise or foolish, and then in other cases, wishing to be known for having destroyed the taints when we haven't. So meaning those in the world who declare arahantship with the destruction of the taints, when it's really a lie, they haven't actually attained that. So in the Anaṅgaṇa Sutta, evil wishes and being dominated by evil wishes is one of the qualities of being difficult to instruct, duvacho. So when we remove what we're looking at in this Anaṅgaṇa Sutta, it really helps us to become at least part of the way to being easy to instruct. So it helps us to grow in Dhamma and to develop the noble path. So this is the intersection between Anaṅgaṇa Sutta, this Venerable Sāriputta's teaching, and also Anaṅgaṇa Sutta, which is Venerable MahāMoggallāna's teaching. Okay, so Venerable Sāriputta then elaborated further to help us understand blemishes as the term for spheres of evil and unwholesome wishes, and particularly those associated with anger and bitterness. So the words for anger and bitterness in Pali are kopa, apachayo. So kopa is the word that we've said here is anger, but it also means showing temper, becoming rageful, getting agitated, or the literal meaning is also that we're shaking. And apachayo can also be translated not just bitterness, but also indignation or outrage. So bear that in mind that Venerable Sariputta, the cases that we're going to look at, his examples or cases relate to the monastic sangha, but we're going to relate them back to household life in order to clean and purify, the mind. Now, as we go through these cases, we might think, oh, I don't have any of these. I'm not like that. But try to think about them from the perspective of when we've gotten angry, irritated, indignant, outraged in the past. And that's where the treasure is when it comes to this Dhamma, that the anger, if we admit to it, it points to where our evil, unwholesome wishes are hidden. Now, the first three cases that we're going to look at on this slide, they relate to evil or corrupt wishes regarding our transgressions or wrongdoings, our misconduct. So the first one, he says, it is possible that a bhikkhu here might wish, if I commit an offense, let the bhikkhus not know that I have committed an offense. And it is possible that the bhikkhus come to know that that bhikkhu has committed an offense. So he is angry and bitter thus. The bhikkhus know I have committed an offense. The anger and bitterness are both a blemish. So our evil wish is we don't want others to find out about our transgressions, our misconduct. And if they do find out, we get angry and bitter about it. So for the monastic sangha, committing an offense means breaking the rules that are set forth in the Vinaya, so the monastic law or their code of discipline. And in this case, a monastic becomes angry and outraged when others find out about their offenses because they don't want anybody else to know about them. Now, in the case of householders, transgressions or wrongdoings relate to the 5 precepts, but on the noble path, it extends to the 10 unskilled states, so dasakusala, misconduct by body, speech, and mind, and of course, it includes other mental stains or defilements. So let's look at a few examples. So our wish may be, we don't want people to find out that we yelled at our elderly parents during a discussion about a family matter and how we used harsh speech. Or we don't want people to find out that we cheated on our partner with a colleague or a friend, as an example. Or we don't want people to know that we have a gambling problem and have lost a lot of the family wealth. Or maybe we don't want people, because we're in Dhamma, to know that we indulge in politics and conspiracy theories on the internet, or we get into angry debates about Dhamma on online Dhamma forums. Or maybe we're envious towards a sibling or a friend, and we don't want people to know that we're envious. Now, even as a child, we may have wanted to hide our naughty actions from our parents, like stealing from their wallet because they didn't give us enough pocket money, or lying to them about our whereabouts. So these are also examples that can be contemplated in the meditation. Now, if people find out about these things, we become angry and bitter because we value having the good reputation over a bad one. We don't want people to find evidence of misconduct and then view us differently or stop supporting us. And really, what this is saying is we don't want to face up to the wrongdoing. We might think if they don't find out, maybe we've gotten away with it, it'll stay hidden. And if that's the case, then there's no moral shame or fear of wrongdoing, and we don't understand that we can't avoid the karma. We don't see the danger and the harm of not abandoning transgressions, let alone the wish. So, as the Buddha has taught, we're the owners of our actions, heir of our actions, bound to those actions. So, the key with all of these wishes is actually to acknowledge our own examples and abandon the evil, unwholesome wishes by seeing it with wisdom. That it's bad, that it leads to anger and bitterness, that these are blemishes in the mind that can multiply. And also, we would be called an inferior person and we'd end up in a bad destination. The second one is, it is possible that a bhikkhu here might wish, if I commit an offense, let the bhikkhus admonish me in private, not in the midst of the sangha. And it is possible that the bhikkhus admonish that bhikkhu in the midst of the sangha, not in private. So he is angry and bitter thus. The bhikkhus admonish me in the midst of the sangha, not in private. The anger and bitterness are both a blemish. So our evil wish here is we don't want to be instructed, reproved, or given feedback in public. Or to a wider audience or group, only in private. For example, our wish may be we don't want our partner to tell us off about our excessive spending at a social gathering where all of our friends are there, but only when we're alone. Or we don't want our grown up children to reveal our defilements in front of extended family. So in public, only at home with the immediate family. Or at work, we don't want our boss to give us feedback in front of the team that we lead, or even our peers. We want it in private. Or we're involved in a court case with a family member or a friend, and all the grievances are being published in the media and online, including our transgressions, and we don't wish for them to be aired so publicly for everyone to see and hear. We want them to be kept private. Or we don't want our Dhamma teacher to publicly admonish us in front of the group or send that personal feedback to the group via messaging. We want it to be done one-on-one. And then if you think about childhood, even as a child, we wouldn't want our parents to tell us off or give us feedback in front of our siblings or in front of our classmates. So in these cases, you can expect we'd become angry and outraged when it's done in public or to a wider audience rather than privately. So when we look at this, our sense of self is really predictive of its good standing or reputation. The pleasure is when people see us favorably with no wrongdoings. We take that as me and mine. And it's really painful when that changes, when we fall from that. So similar to the first case, we don't want our transgressions to be seen by the wider group. And we fail to see the danger or harm of not simply abandoning the transgressions in the first place. And again, we must acknowledge that these are evil, unwholesome wishes. So what do we need to do? We need to abandon them with wisdom and see that it leads to this anger and bitterness. And these are blemishes in the mind. So we would rightly be called an inferior person. And the ultimate thing is that we would pass away with a mind filled with defilements, with lust, hatred, and delusion. And so a bad destination can be expected. Now, the third one, Venerable Sāriputta says, it is possible that a bhikkhu here might wish, if I commit an offense, let a person who is my equal admonish me, not a person who is not my equal. And it is possible that a person not his equal admonishes him, not a person his equal. So he is angry and bitter thus. A person not my equal admonishes me, not a person my equal. The anger and bitterness are both a blemish. So our evil wish is if we've transgressed or had some kind of misconduct, we don't want to be instructed, reproved, or given feedback by someone we consider uh, not our equal. Yes. So in this case, for example, we wish that they are our equal or our peer. So our wish may be, say we're an older person, say we're the parent. We may not want to be reproved by our child, a younger person. We might think, this child doesn't understand the complexities. They're not someone we want to receive feedback from. What do they know? They haven't lived long enough. Or we might be thinking, I'm the parent, you're the child. And therefore our wish is, I don't want someone younger to tell me these things. Or the opposite, we're a younger person. We might not want to be admonished by an older person. So an example could be they admonish us for being super competitive in our business. We want to succeed at all costs, that kind of approach to business. And we think as an older person that they're coming from an old way of doing business that's risk adverse, or we measure them as having only achieved limited success in their lifetime. But either way, we have that kind of wish not to receive the feedback from someone who is older than us. Or we're a wealthy person from an elite class who doesn't wish to be instructed by someone from a less affluent background. We might think, who do you think you are to instruct me? And then at work, maybe we don't want to be reproved by a subordinate, someone we consider inferior in the workplace. Maybe we think they don't have the intelligence or the qualifications or the experience. And so that's our wish, not to be uh, given feedback by them. And we may not want to receive feedback in Dhamma because of a person's gender or their race, or because they've been practicing Dhamma for a lot less time than we have. And so we think they're not qualified to give us feedback. And so when any of these things happen, we become angry, we become indignant, we become outraged that such a person that we consider is not our peer has instructed, reproved, or given us feedback. And so in these cases, when we find our own examples, it's important to acknowledge that these are the kinds of wishes that if we don't abandon them, we get angry. And the anger and the bitterness is a blemish in the mind. And so it's important that we don't want to have this kind of inferior practice. We don't want to have a defiled mind and end up in a bad destination. So then the remaining cases relate to evil or corrupt wishes regarding our desires or longings, mostly in the vicinity of gain, honor, and praise. So what's occurring with these remainder cases is that we assign value to pleasurable feeling that we expect from gain, so material gain, from honor and praise, and we take that as me and mine. And when we're attached to that feeling and we want it to last, that's where the stinginess is prevalent. So we have stinginess for gain, stinginess for abode, stinginess for families or groups, stinginess for reputation, stinginess for Dhamma. This is what we see arising in the mind connected with these kinds of evil wishes about gain, honor, and praise, that it actually escalates from anger and bitterness all the way to stinginess and more. Now, as we go through these remaining cases, remember what I said at the beginning. We might think, I don't have any of these evil, unwholesome wishes. But it's often that when we are snubbed or we don't receive something, that's when we discover like, I did have some evil wish about that. And so bear that in mind as we go through these next cases. So it's possible, this is what Venerable Sāriputta says, it is possible that a bhikkhu here might wish, oh, that the teacher might teach the Dhamma to the bhikkhus by asking a series of questions of me, not of some other bhikkhu. And it is possible that the teacher teaches the Dhamma to the bhikkhus by asking a series of questions of some other bhikkhu, not of that bhikkhu. So he is angry and bitter thus. The teacher teaches the Dhamma to the bhikkhus by asking a series of questions of some other bhikkhu, not of me. The anger and bitterness are both a blemish. So here our evil wish is we want to have the honor of being called on by the teacher. So this can extend to being called on to answer questions, called on to speak, called on to offer advice or instruction, or to be listened to. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a teacher. It could be somebody else in our life. And this may be something we desire in Dhamma groups. So maybe it is like this in this particular case, that we want the teacher to call on us to answer the questions, or to read out the sutta, or to share the insight from our meditation, or to cover for the teacher when they step away and not others. Knowingly or unknowingly, we may see that other people in the Dhamma group are our competitors for the honor. Anyway, there are everyday examples that we also have these kinds of wishes. So our wish may be back in school when we were a student. We're one of the ones that regularly raise our hand in class wanting the teacher to call on us and not others. Or in the family, we want to be the person that others call on for advice or for our opinion about a situation and not others. Or at work, we want our boss to select us to do the important client presentation or to be the one to answer the team questions and not others. Or in a group discussion or even in a conversation, we want to be the one to speak and dominate and not others. So when we don't get our way, we would become angry and bitter if we get passed over by others and that we're challenged to have the honor. So again, if we find these kinds of examples, we must abandon these evil, unwholesome wishes because we get angry. And that's the blemish, the anger and bitterness. And so if we don't abandon them, we'll have this defiled mind and the defilements multiply. Anger becomes derogation, becomes envy, becomes hypocrisy and more. And so ultimately, we could end up in a bad destination and be called an inferior person. Then the next one says, it is possible that a bhikkhu here might wish, oh, that the bhikkhus might enter the village for alms, putting me in the forefront, not some other bhikkhu. And it's possible that the bhikkhus enter the village for alms, putting some other bhikkhu in the forefront, not that bhikkhu. So he's angry and bitter thus. The bhikkhus enter the village for alms, putting some other bhikkhu in the forefront, not me. The anger and bitterness are both a blemish. So our evil wish is that we want to have the honor of being at the forefront of a group in public, not others. Basically, what we desire is to be the most esteemed, to have the respected position, because going first usually means seniority. So, for example, our wish may be, we're an athlete. We want the honor of leading the team out at the start of the match, or bearing the flag at a country level event, not others. At school, we want the honor of leading the class or being selected to represent the school, not others. At a gathering of extended family, we want the honor of being invited to serve the meal first, not others. At work, we want the honor of leading the project team to present to clients or to present to the executive, not others. So we become angry and bitter if we don't receive the honors of getting the esteemed position. And again, we need to acknowledge that these are the kinds of examples that come from evil, unwholesome wishes, and it leads to a blemished mind that is angry and bitter. And so we need to abandon those unwholesome wishes. Now, I just want to stop here and just say that it's not the fact that we do get honors. So we might legitimately get honors, but what Venerable Sāriputta is talking about here is when we grasp onto them, wanting to have it again, wanting it desperately as something that gives us pleasure, and it's happening in a corrupt way. So if we happen to get it, and that's great. If we don't happen to get it, that's also fine. There's equanimity there. But what Venerable Sāriputta is saying, it's the fact that our mind is getting corrupt with these evil wishes. It desires it at any cost. We don't want anybody else to have those sort of material gains or those their esteem needs being met. So that's the distinction. Don't think that you shouldn't get certain ones. If you happen to get them, if they're deserving, that's fine. But if you desperately cling on and the mind becomes corrupt like that, then it's a different story. So then Venerable Sāriputta says, it is possible that a bhikkhu might wish, oh, that I might get the best seat, the best water, the best alms food in the refectory, not some other bhikkhu. And it is possible that some other bhikkhu gets the best seat. So our evil wish is that we want the material gains or the privileges to be offered or given to us, not to others. So, for example, our wish may be at work, there's an important client function. We want the honor of being invited to the corporate box to entertain the clients. We want to be given the best food and drinks and other privileges, and not our other colleagues. Or at a friend's wedding, we want the honor of being part of the wedding party, to sit at the top table and getting all the privileges that come with that, and not other friends. Or when we're a child and we have lots of siblings, we want to get the best portion of the family meal, not our siblings. And then if it's a Dhamma example, say it's at a Dhamma session, we want to be offered the most comfortable seat in front near the teacher and invited to take the meals first or have other people serve us. And then when we stay at the monastery, instead of the dormitory, we wish that as lay guests, we want to be offered the special accommodation for family and friends of the Sangha. So not the dormitory or the shared accommodation. And we want it to be given to us and not others. And when it doesn't happen, any of these things, we become angry and bitter because we don't get those material gains or privileges. So again, what do we need to do? We need to abandon these evil wishes, because what are we getting? We're getting anger and bitterness. And so that means the mind is defiled, and from anger it multiplies. And so it leads to a bad destination. We're an inferior person at that level. And then the last one on this page is, it is possible that a bhikkhu here might wish, oh, that I might give the blessing in the refectory after the meal, not some other bhikkhu. And it is possible that some other bhikkhu gives the blessing. So here our evil wish is that we want to have the honor of giving the blessings, not others, or being given, or people coming to seek our approval. That's probably what it's like for lay people. So our wish, in the sense of maybe in Dhamma, at the end of a meditation retreat or a Dhamma session, we want the honor of doing the Anaṅgaṇa or paying gratitude to the teacher and others, and not other people doing that. Or we want our children or younger people to seek our approval and our blessings, not from other people, such as we want them to seek our approval for their choice of study, or to give blessings before they go abroad, or give approval and blessings for who they wish to marry. Or in business, we might want others to seek our approval for major business dealings or developments and not from other people. So if we become angry or indignant, it's because we haven't been given that honor, that people haven't consulted us or haven't asked for our blessings. And so we must acknowledge that if we have these kinds of evil wishes, we've got to abandon them. And that makes us an inferior person if we don't abandon them. Okay. And finally, the last view, it says, it is possible that a bhikkhu here might wish, oh, that I might teach the Dhamma to the bhikkhus. And the next one is, I might teach the Dhamma to the bhikkhunis. The next one is to teach the Dhamma to the male lay followers or the female lay followers visiting the monastery, not some other bhikkhu. And it is possible that some other bhikkhu teaches the Dhamma. So here our evil wish in regard to teaching the Dhamma is that we want the honor to teach the fourfold Sangha, not others. So within temples and monasteries, there can be evil wishes like this, especially when it comes to the desire for fame, popularity, praise, and material support. As blemishes, we know these wishes might start with anger and bitterness when you don't get selected and you don't get popular and all those sorts of things. And it escalates to derogation, envy, competition, conceit, and more. So we know in the world it's like that. But even lay followers can think, I'm the suitable person. Only I can lift people's minds with my unique skill and experience of explaining noble Dhamma. Others aren't as good as me. I should be given the Dhamma seat. I should receive the invitation. Sounds funny, doesn't it? But I mean, when these evil wishes are taking hold of the mind, that's what it sounds like. Now, there are other examples that are not related to Dhamma, where our wish may be at work. We want to be the person invited to lead the big project or to be given the promotion and the responsibility for the important piece of work, not others. Or in our charitable work in the community, we want to be invited to sit on the board, to have the responsibility for certain committees, not other people. Or as a teacher, we want to have our thesis and curriculum be the ones that are used to teach students, not those of others. Or even when we're younger, something as simple as we want to be asked to be the ones to take care of the younger kids, not other people. And so we become angry and outraged and righteously indignant if we get passed over and not given those honors. So again, we've got to acknowledge that we need to abandon these evil wishes because they're quite bad for us. Like these kinds of examples, when you see the depth of them and when you investigate yourself, you realize this is really bad. And then it multiplies because then we start derogating people or disparaging people or having envy and stinginess and competition. So what does that mean? That we would have a defiled mind. So that's why we're called inferior. And then Venerable Sāriputta says, it is possible that a bhikkhu here might wish, oh, that the bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, men lay followers, women lay followers, might honor, respect, revere, and venerate me, not some other bhikkhu. And it is possible that they honor some other bhikkhu. So our wish here is for the fourfold Sangha to honor, respect, revere, and venerate us, not others. So when these kinds of evil wishes are bred within monasteries and temples, of course, there can be a lot of envy about certain monastics who appear to receive a lot of honor, respect, and veneration. They become very famous and very popular. And so there are other monastics in the monastery who might be thinking, how come they receive that and I don't? So it sounds like envy, doesn't it? He or she has, I don't. And so if we relate that to the lay situation, our wish may be, as a long-time supporter of a temple or monastery, or maybe a group of them, We want to be acknowledged, honored, and given special treatment by the monastic Sangha and not others. So this might be we want to be granted private audiences with the abbot of the monastery, or we wish to be given special accommodation at the monastery, or we wish to have special invitations to private retreats, or travel privileges with only a select group of monastics and lay followers. So, these things can happen. Or we're part of a Dhamma community and we want the members of the community to honor, respect, revere, and venerate us for our contributions in the past above all others. Or in the family, we want our children, our grandchildren, and other extended family to value and respect us, to favor us above all others. Or at work, we want to be the golden child that the executives favor, the bosses favor, and give us the honors and not our other colleagues. Or in the community, we want to receive the award from the government and the honor and recognition for our contribution in whatever area is our skill or expertise. So it could be medicine, science, technology, or something else, and not to be given to other people. And so when we don't receive those honors, that respect, that reverence, that veneration, we become angry because we believe that we deserve those things. And so again, with these evil wishes, whatever they are, you might have your own examples. The important thing is to see if we end up in anger and bitterness, we need to abandon the evil and unwholesome wish. If we don't, then we have the defiled mind and can lead to a bad destination. And then the last few, it says, it is possible that a bhikkhu here might wish, oh, that I might be the one to get a superior robe, superior alms food, a superior resting place, superior medicinal requisites, not some other bhikkhu. And it is possible that some other bhikkhu is the one to get those superior requisites, not that bhikkhu. So he is angry and bitter thus. Another bhikkhu is the one to get superior medicinal requisites, not me. The anger and bitterness are both a blemish. So here, our evil wish, like generally speaking, is we want the best requisites to be offered or given to us, not to others. So examples, our wish may be when a relative visits from abroad, we want to be given the best gifts, not to others. Or when we're sick, we want our loved ones to offer us the best medicine or the best medical treatment, not others. Or at work, we want to be invited to the corporate events that offer the best food and hospitality, not others. Or when we go on holidays with friends and say we rent a Airbnb, we want to get the best room in the place. Or when we're young, we want to receive the best presents on our birthday and not our siblings. And this might still be the case now when it comes to, say, our parents or our grandparents' wills. We want to be the main beneficiary, not our siblings or others. And so we become angry and bitter if those best requisites are not given to us, but given to others. So again, what do we need to do? We need to abandon such evil, unwholesome wishes. We don't want to go and get angry. Now, Venerable Sāriputta ends by saying, blemish, friend, is a term for the spheres of these evil, unwholesome wishes. So you can see this is Venerable Sāriputta's masterclass on evil, unwholesome wishes pertaining to anger and bitterness. So Venerable Sāriputta, he's really shown by his 19 cases that it's really owning up, like examining ourselves and owning up to these kinds of wishes that are mainly related to material needs or esteem needs, and seeing with wisdom how they lead to anger and bitterness, meaning our mind is certainly blemished or defiled. And we've said throughout, what I've repeatedly said is the abandoning. We've got to abandon the evil, unwholesome wishes. This is no different to Vatupama Sutta, Anumana Sutta, Sacitta Sutta. It's a similar kind of thing. And so on this slide, there's a simplified summary of the cases presented by Venerable Sāriputta that have been reframed for lay people to contemplate. So do we wish for others not to know our transgressions? Do we wish not to be reproved or given feedback in front of others or in public? Do we wish to be reproved or given feedback by someone equal, not someone we consider unequal? Do we wish to have the honor of being called on to answer questions, to be asked for advice, not others? Do we wish to have the honor of being put at the forefront of a group in public, not others, so be seen as a senior person? Do we wish for any material gains or privileges to be offered or given to us, not others? Do we wish to have the honor of giving the blessing or approval, not others? Do we wish to have the honor of being invited to teach, lead, being given the responsibility, not others? Do we wish for others to honor, respect, revere, and venerate us, not others? And lastly, do we wish for the best requisites to be offered or given to us, not to others? So when any of the above wishes are not met, the question we ask is, do we become angry and bitter? And if so, we need to abandon the evil, unwholesome wishes because we see it actually defiles our mind. And it's an inferior thing for us to allow it to be there. So at this point, let's do a short meditation. So let's do about 10 minutes meditation to take this into our mind, particularly with the examples fresh. So you don't have to contemplate all of these evil wishes. Just pick one or two to contemplate. And the key thing to remember is that it's usually where we become angry in the past. That's where it points to having evil wishes. So check if you have evil, unwholesome wishes. So apply your own examples. When you see that you certainly become angry and bitter because your wish wasn't met, abandon that evil, unwholesome wish with wisdom. See the danger of having a blemished mind and abandon that unwholesome. And so in the meditation, what should happen is when you clean the mind of these wishes and the blemishes, the mind becomes quite clean. It becomes uplifted. And so be happy about that, even for this short meditation. Okay, let's do a 10-minute meditation, and I'll call us out when it's time to continue with the sutta. Wishing you well. things of the Triple Gem, we can come out of our meditation. So we've now gone through the cases provided by Venerable Sāriputta, and we've meditated a little bit on that. And what we can see is that the extent, I guess, to which we all have evil, unwholesome wishes, it's like our mind keeps holding on to something that we've assigned value to, something that we think gives us pleasure. And so what's evident is that we have a lot of desires at the level of material wants and also at the level of esteem needs. And because of that, we end up abiding in anger and bitterness most of the time because we don't always get what we want. Now, the Buddha's taught that all beings are sustained by nutriment. So we have physical nutriment, contact as nutriment, mental volition as nutriment, and consciousness as nutriment. When we sustain ourselves on these four nutriments, we end up going the wrong way through desire, the wrong way through hate, fear, and delusion. So some of you will know this four nutriment table. Now, this is where we spend most of our time, actually. When we're not developing our mind in Dhamma, we are usually going the wrong way through desire, hate, fear, and delusion. Now, with Venerable Sāriputta's teaching, because of our evil, unwholesome wishes, what we're seeing is we keep going down the physical nutriment path because you can see it's full of sensual desire. And because of that, we also go through contact as nutriment because we want the pleasurable feeling, whether it's a pleasurable feeling because of the material side or whether it's pleasurable feeling because of esteem needs. So it's not that the other nutriments are not playing their part, they are, but in this particular teaching, Anaṅgaṇa Sutta, the focus that Venerable Sāriputta is focusing on is being caught in sensual desires, so the physical nutriment path, and ending up in the contact as nutriment and hate path. So when we look at these evil, unwholesome wishes, what we've examined today, we sustain ourselves because what do we identify with the most? It's the physical nutriment, mainly our own physical nutriment, this form that we take as mind. So we take it as beautiful or pleasing, sensual desire arises and it escalates. And there's covetousness, and we come to the taint of sensual desire. And at this point, we have a very strong sense of this post-perception that there's pleasure. And this pleasure is saying, oh, it'll be good. It'll be good like this. And we're not thinking about the aging phenomena, and that pleasure keeps saying it'll be good. We don't realize that's a lie. So we come to the flood of sensual desire, and then the dart of lust. And this dart of lust is adamant that, this is beautiful, this is pleasing. And so we establish on the form and we go the wrong way through desire. Now, these desires are what we hold in our mind. So it becomes contact as nutriment because we're holding on to that in our mind. So the perversion that there's pleasure in the painful arises. We're not seeing, as we said, the aging phenomena, how it's subject to change, so we think it's pleasurable. And so this leads to clinging to virtue and observances, which assume some kind of permanency into the future. I can make this last if I do this or that, if I get this or that. So this means we're happy to do certain things and live for that pleasure. For example, we're happy to observe precepts or help on retreat or teach Dhamma if we can gain honor and praise in the future. It's valuable to us because we think, oh, I can live like this. That's where the bond of existence. But we're happy to exist like this now. We're happy to exist in the future. But what happens, like Venerable Sāriputta says, that gain, honor, and praise is given to somebody else. Or our friends find out that we have all these sensual desires and they admonish us. So we come to this body tie of ill will. We get angry because we're not getting what we want. And maybe we did it before and we're no longer getting it as we did before. So instead of pleasure that we valued in our mind, we're getting the suffering, we're getting the pain. So in our mind, we thought sensual desires are a good thing, that this thing is a good thing. We didn't see that it's subject to change, that it has this aging phenomena. But over here, we're experiencing the truth of that, but we're still adamant, still adamant. It's pleasurable. And the truth is, whatever we desire, those things that are like us, they're subject to aging, sickness, death, and defilement. So they can't be relied upon. They're deceptive in nature. And so that's why we end up in hate. From birth to birth, we've been misled by our pleasure seeking. And we keep reconstructing only to experience suffering over and over. When we don't understand things like this, it means that we keep having these evil, unwholesome wishes or desires. And where do we end up? We end up abiding in anger and hate most of the time. And so that's why when the Buddha talks about the path of renunciation, that's what he means. We need to renunciate. We need to see this in operation. Anaṅgaṇa Sutta helps to show this, but this is another way of examining it. So if we continue with the sutta, Venerable Sāriputta goes on to say, if the spheres of these evil and wholesome wishes are seen and heard to be unabandoned in any bhikkhu, then for all he may be a forest dweller, a frequenter of remote abodes, an alms food eater, a house-to-house seeker, a refuse rag wearer, a wearer of rough robes. Still his companions in the spiritual life do not honor, respect, revere, and venerate him. Why is that? Because the spheres of these evil, unwholesome wishes are seen and heard to be unabandoned in that Venerable One. What Venerable Sāriputta meant is that it doesn't matter if we have the outward appearance of simplicity that reflects renunciation. But if our spiritual companions find that we have all these evil, unwholesome wishes and blemishes, they wouldn't respect us. They wouldn't honor us for that kind of practice. Why? Because what they're seeing is the evidence of the inferiority of our practice. So our outward practice is not reflecting our internal practice, and they've found out. And it's the internal practice that is important. As the Buddha would say, mind is the forerunner, the leader. So if our mind is rotten and crooked, then the rest of our conduct by body, speech, and mind will inevitably be rotten and crooked. And so the wrong path is cultivated. So we understand why certain monks and nuns don't honor and respect another monk or nun who hasn't abandoned evil and wholesome wishes. So if it's a senior monk or nun who's their teacher, it's often the case they decide to leave and find another teacher or community. Why? It's because they see the evidence of an inferior practice, even though that senior teacher may be popular or famous. Because within their community, they see that the community is declining, that there are issues that other people don't see, that these blemishes of anger lead to derogation, envy, divisiveness, stinginess, and so on. And then maybe they evidence verbal misconduct in the temple, or even physical misconduct, where they end up hitting each other or other things. So likewise, lay followers, they may not wish to support monks or nuns who have these kinds of internal practices. And they see that, these monks or nuns get angry and breed other blemishes or defilements. And so it can also lead to devout lay followers feeling uninspired to go forth. So another instance would be lay people, they don't honor other lay disciples of the Buddha because they see evidence like this. Sometimes it might be the case where we're in Dhamma and we wish that our family and friends come to Dhamma, but they get turned off because they see we're still having evil, unwholesome wishes. We still have anger and bitterness and all the other kiles, defilement. And so we become poor role models and we become the obstructors of them coming to Dhamma, even though our wish is for them to come. Now, in the Dhammadayada Sutta, Venerable Sāriputta explained the Buddha's instruction on how we must be heirs in Dhamma, not heirs in material things. Dhammadayada me bhavatta ma amisa dayada. So when we have evil and wholesome wishes and it's all these sensual desires and wants, we're becoming heirs in material things, not heirs in Dhamma. What we forget is that these material things, so the generosity offered by offered to the fourfold Sangha, the honor and praise for the teachings, they're because of the fully enlightened Buddha, the Sambuddha. So they're the blessings of the fully enlightened Buddha. So it's only because of the fully enlightened Buddha that these things still remain. And so it's really good to reflect that we must be shameful if we take any of these things as me and mine, or develop on the wrong path as an heir to material things. Then Venerable Sāriputta said, suppose a bronze dish were brought from a shop or a smithy, clean and bright, and the owners put the carcass of a snake or dog or a human being in it, and covering it with another dish, went back to the market. Then people seeing it said, what is that you are carrying about like a treasure? Then, raising the lid and uncovering it, they looked in, and as soon as they saw, they were inspired with such loathing, repugnance, and disgust that even those who were hungry would not want to eat, not to speak of those who were full. So too, if the spheres of these evil, unwholesome wishes are seen and heard to be unabandoned in any bhikkhu, then for all he may be a forest dweller, and all the other descriptions, unabandoned in that venerable one. So with this particular simile, Venerable Sāriputta is showing, again, we can have the outer appearance of renunciation, simplicity, and purity, like having this, lovely bronze dish. And for lay people, it may not be about wearing different robes and things like that, but for lay people, it might be living more simply, downsizing and moving away from the hustle and bustle, maybe even giving up eating at night and no longer socializing as before. But what he's saying is like when we walk around carrying it like what we've done in terms of renunciation, the outward stuff, we're carrying this bright covered clean bronze dish as if it's a treasure. But then people discover that we have evil, unwholesome wishes and see that we get angry, that we're envious, all these other kinds of defilement. And it's likened to removing the cover and revealing that what we're really carrying around is this disgusting dead carcass. And so people would be disgusted with us. They would find it, as Venerable Sāriputta said, loathing, repugnance, and disgust. And because they've seen the inferiority of our practice. And because of this, they wouldn't honor and respect us. And then, just see. Yep, okay. So then Venerable Sāriputta said, if the spheres of these evil unwholesome wishes are seen and heard to be abandoned in any bhikkhu, then for all he may be a village dweller, an acceptor of invitations, a wearer of robes given by householders, yet his companions in the spiritual life honor, respect, revere, and venerate him. Why is that? Because the spheres of these evil, unwholesome wishes are seen and heard to be abandoned in that venerable one. So we'll just stop there. In this case, what Venerable Sāriputta meant is that even if our practice is less strict and austere from an outward perspective, if our spiritual companions or our friends in Dhamma, they find that we actually do have a good practice, that we're free of blemishes, defilements, we've abandoned evil and wholesome wishes, then they do respect us, they do venerate us and revere us and honor us. Why? It's because of the superiority of our practice. So outward practice in this case, may not reflect the internal practice, but our internal practice from mind being the forerunner, the leader, our mind is clean, it's upright, and therefore the rest of our conduct by body, speech, and mind will also be clean and bright. So the Noble Eightfold Path can be cultivated or is being cultivated. And so when it's like this is where you see we become good role models, having given up evil and wholesome wishes. So giving up the desire to hide any misconduct or longing for gain, honor, and praise. In this case, we're developing as heirs in Dhamma, not heirs in material things. And if you remember, every time we talk about stream entry or those who are leaning towards stream entry and those with noble attainments, they would always admit transgressions. They wouldn't hide it. They would be willing to receive that feedback and to check and to make amends. Anyway, so this is how, if you think about it, this is how Venerable Sāriputta got inspired when he met Venerable Assaji, because when he met Venerable Assaji, he found him to be both internally and externally purified. He commented on his calm demeanor and calm, pristine practice. And so in that case, in even Venerable Sāriputta's case, he wanted to go forth. He was inspired. And then Venerable Sāriputta says, suppose a bronze dish were brought from a shop or a smithy clean and bright, and the owners put clean boiled rice and various soups and sauces into it, and covering it with another dish went back to the market. Then people seeing it said, what is that you are carrying around like a treasure? Then raising the lid and uncovering it, they looked in, and as soon as they saw, they were inspired with such liking, appetite, and relish that even those who were full would not want to would want to eat, not to speak of those who were hungry. So too, friend, if the spheres of these evil and unwholesome wishes are seen and heard to be abandoned in any bhikkhu, then for all he may be a village dweller abandoned in that venerable one. So, with this simile, Venerable Sariputta is showing how we can have a softer practice that is not as ascetic, not as austere. Uh, it's a bit like these are village monks, not village monks, city monks, as opposed to forest dwelling monks, is what he's talking about, and accepting invitations from householders, whereas the forest monks wouldn't do that. But in the case of lay people, we may be living more normally with a little bit of simplicity, but this is how we carry around the bronze dish, that we are very happy to be carrying around. And then when people open that dish, they see that actually there's no blemishes, just like those delicious food, the curries and everything. People would be delighted. They would find it appetizing and relish those curries. So in the same way, spiritual companions or friends in Dhamma, they would be inspired by us. They would want to be around us. They would find us likable, agreeable, and suitable to be a spiritual companion because of the superiority of our practice. And because of that, they would honor and respect us. So if you remember, Buddha had said to Venerable Ananda, when Venerable Ananda had said, spiritual, good friendship, good comradeship, all those things are 50% of the spiritual path or the spiritual life. And the Buddha corrected him. This was in the Upada Sutta. He said to Venerable Ananda that good friendship, good companionship, good comradeship, it's 100%, the entire spiritual life. And when you have good friend, a good companion, or a good comrade, it's to be expected that one would develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path. So that's why why Venerable Sāriputta keeps talking about spiritual companions. It's because they're very important to developing on this path. And so if we have an inferior practice, it's not good for us. If we have a superior practice and actually make effort to clean the mind of defilements and blemishes, to have an unblemished mind, then we can have good friends, we can maintain them, and more importantly, we can grow in Dhamma and develop this Noble Eightfold Path, and we know it's the path out of suffering. Okay, so Venerable MahāMoggallāna. When this was said, the Venerable MahāMoggallāna said to Venerable Sāriputta, a simile occurs to me, friend Sāriputta, stated friend Moggallāna. On the occasion, friend, I was living at the hill fort at Rajagaha. Then, when it was morning, I dressed, and taking my bowl and outer robe, I went into Rajagaha for alms. Now, on that occasion, Samiti, the cartwright's son, was planing a fellow, and the Ajivaka Panduputta, son of a former cartwright, was standing by. Then this thought arose in the Ajivaka Panduputta's mind. Oh, that this Samiti, the cartwright's son, might plane this bend, this twist, this fault out of the fellow, so that it would be without bends, twists, or faults, and come to consist purely of heartwood. And just as this thought came to pass in his mind, so did Samiti, the cartwright's son, plane that bend, that twist, that fault out of the fellow. Then Ajivaka Panduputta, son of a former cartwright, was glad, and he voiced his gladness thus. He plains, just as if he knew my heart with his heart. The simile that Venerable MahāMoggallāna is recalling is a past incident when he was on alms round, where he saw this Ajivaka Panduputta so the son of a former cartwright or chariot maker, he saw Samiti, so the son of a cartwright, planing a fellow. So fellow is the fellow is the segment of a ring of wood that's just inside the iron tire of the wheel. So one of these segments. And Samiti was working on the fellow to work out the faults, to remove the crookedness in the segment of the wheel. And as Ajivaka Pandaputta watched Samiti working away, thoughts came to Ajivaka Pandaputta's mind about how the work should be done. And right then he observed Samiti doing the work as if he had read Ajivaka's mind. And so Venerable MahāMoggallāna had read Ajivaka Pandaputta's mind, and when Ajivaka Pandaputta gladly thought, he plains just as if he knew my heart with his heart, Venerable MahāMoggallāna is rejoicing in Venerable Sāriputta's teaching. He had the same thought that Ajivaka Pandaputta had, which is he plains the Dhamma, or planes actually the minds of these monks, just as if he knew my heart with his heart. So he's removing those unwholesome things in those bhikkhus that are listening to the Dhamma, that have these evil unwholesome wishes and blemishes. And so he's saying that Venerable Sāriputta has taught the Dhamma as if he's read Venerable MahāMoggallāna's mind. And then Venerable MahāMoggallāna reinforces Venerable Sāriputta's teaching. He concludes, so too, friend, there are persons who are faithless and have gone forth from the home life into homelessness, not out of faith or conviction, but seeking a livelihood, who are fraudulent, deceitful, treacherous, haughty, hollow, personally vain, rough-toothed, loose-spoken, unguarded in their sense faculties, immoderate in eating, undevoted to wakefulness, unconcerned with recluseship, not greatly respectful of training, luxurious, careless, leaders in backsliding, neglectful of seclusion, lazy, wanting in energy, unmindful, not fully aware, unconcentrated, with straying minds, devoid of wisdom, drivellers. The Venerable Sāriputta, with his discourse on the Dhamma, plains out their faults, just as if he knew my heart with his heart. So we'll just stop there. Venerable MahāMoggallāna, of course, he's provided here a description of false renunciants or recluses who have blemishes. So those are persons who are living as heirs in material things, quite obvious, not heirs in Dhamma. And these false renunciants are full of faults or unwholesome qualities, unskilled states. So they're bent and crooked like the wheel that Samiti was working on. So they're following the path, quite obviously, of greed, hatred, and delusion. And what he stated or confirmed, just like his simile, is that Venerable Sāriputta plains out the faults of these false renunciants with the teaching that he's just given. So he's praising Venerable Sāriputta's teaching, again, as if he's spoken what's in Venerable MahāMoggallāna's mind. And we know that Venerable MahāMoggallāna, is given quite a similar teaching in the Anaṅgaṇa Sutta. So that's quite the connection there. Then he goes on. But there are clansmen who have gone forth out of faith from the home life into homelessness, who are not fraudulent, deceitful, treacherous, haughty, hollow, personally vain, rough-toothed, or loose-spoken, who are guarded in their sense faculties, moderate in eating, devoted to wakefulness, concerned with recluseship, greatly respectful of training, not luxurious or careless, who are keen to avoid backsliding, leaders in seclusion, energetic, resolute, established in mindfulness, fully aware, concentrated, with unified minds, possessing wisdom, not drivellers. These, on hearing the Venerable Sāriputta's discourse on the Dhamma, drink it in and eat it, as it were, by word and thought. Good indeed it is that he makes his companions in the spiritual life emerge from the unwholesome and establish themselves in the wholesome. And so this is the definition for true renunciants or recluses who don't have blemishes. And unlike the other lot, they're living as heirs in Dhamma, not heirs in material things. So they're full of wholesome qualities. They're full of seika quality, the trainees mode of practice. They're following the path of non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. They're following the Noble Eightfold Path. And so they would listen to Venerable Sāriputta's teaching with eager ears, delighting in that Dhamma. And Venerable Sāriputta's words and thoughts lift them out of the unwholesome path and place them on the wholesome path. And what Venerable MahāMoggallāna has said on this slide is it doesn't just apply to monastics, it also applies to lay Dhamma followers. So this whole passage, like what's on this slide, it's been taught by Venerable Sāriputta in the Dhammadayāda Sutta, so the Majjhima Nikāya Discourse number 3. And it appears exactly these words in 4 or 5 other suttas as well. So in this session today, I'm not going to explain the significance of this part of the teaching because it's quite deep teaching. It goes into not just anger and bitterness, but it goes into like all the different parts of greed, hatred, and delusion. And I've actually looked at this in Dhammadayāda Sutta. So that Dhamma session titled Heirs in Dhammas is available online if anyone is interested. But basically in this Anangana Sutta, Venerable Sāriputta, as I said earlier, he's given this masterclass on evil, unwholesome wishes that relate to anger and bitterness. But as we know, greed, hatred, and delusion encompasses significantly more than anger and bitterness. So what Venerable MahāMoggallāna, in order to complete the teaching, is he's highlighted in terms of greed, hatred, and delusion, these comprehensive list of unwholesome qualities and their counterparts. So false renunciants, they want to entertain objects of defilement. Therefore, they indulge in unskilled states, unwholesome states. And therefore, they're happy to discard wholesome states. And so what happens? They remain negligent. So they're imbued with delusion, which is driving that whole process of greed, hatred, and delusion. Now, in contrast, a true renunciant develops in Dhamma, guards the sense doors, doesn't want to entertain objects of defilement. Therefore, they abandon unwholesome states and they're developing the wholesome states. And so instead of negligent, their practice is superior in terms of being very, very vigilant. And so they are the true heirs in Dhamma, not material things. And finally, Venerable MahāMoggallāna has said, just as a woman or a man, young, youthful, fond of adornments, with head bathes, having received a garland of lotuses, jasmine or roses, would take it with both hands and place it on the head, so too there are clansmen who have gone forth out of faith, not drivellers. These, on hearing the Venerable Sāriputta's discourse on the Dhamma, drink it in and eat it, as it were, by word and thought. Good indeed it is that he makes his companions in the spiritual life emerge from the unwholesome and establish themselves in the wholesome. Thus it was that these two great beings rejoiced in each other's good words. And so with this simile, this final simile, Venerable MahāMoggallāna has compared Venerable Sāriputta's teaching as comparable to receiving a garland of flowers and taking it in both hands, placing it on one's head. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So we've come to the end of the talk. If you have any questions or comments on this sutta, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment. You can also put your questions in the chat if you don't wish to speak. I'll read it out and see if I can answer it. Blessings of the Triple Gem. Okay, if there are no questions or comments, we can share the merit and blessing. Let's first express our gratitude to the Buddha for these powerful teachings and to of course, Venerable Sāriputta, Venerable MahāMoggallāna, who gave the teachings, but gratitude to the Buddha for these powerful teachings. Let's also express gratitude to our other teachers, parents, and good friends who encourage us in this noble Dhamma. We can also share the merits with all sentient beings. May all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering. Blessings of the Triple Gem to all of you. May you continue to develop and progress on the Noble Eightfold Path and continue to grow in wholesome qualities. May today's session help you to develop an unblemished mind. Wishing you all well. Te Roan Saranai.
Te Roan Saranai.